Assalamu alaikum, Habibis. We're back. And due to popular demand, we're going to complete part 2 of the historic interview with Dr. Zahi Hawass on Joe Rogan.
That's right. And from the clips that I've seen thus far, this is where things get a little bit contentious and spicy. Haven't seen this whole second part yet, so I'm very excited to see where the rest of the conversation goes.
Without further ado, let's get right to it. Levy, and this is Ancient Odysseys.
All right, so in this stage of the discussion, they are continuing with the red ochre cartouche that was found in the upper relieving chambers of the Great Pyramid, inside or above, rather, the King's Chamber. And of course, Joe is pressing him for photos of these things, which Zahi Hawass did not come prepared for this interview. But that's actually readily available online. If you Google cartouche in the relieving chambers, you could probably find it online, and we'll see if that comes up further in the discussion. As I mentioned before, they did find a cartouche, but it's subject for some debate, and it's very contentious whether this is legitimate. A lot of people believe the archaeologists that discovered it actually drew it in there. May also be later graffiti. Nobody knows 100% sure if this is actually part of the original structure. It's not carved, it is painted on in red ochre paint. And a lot of people doubt whether this is original to the structure, myself being included in that group of people that don't think it has anything to do. And it was probably, again, graffiti that was added by the guy that discovered it, because that's what they were looking for, and they just happened to find it.
I'll include a photo and you can judge for yourself.
Yeah. So now Hawass is saying that the discovery of this cartouche in the relieving chambers is from 3 months ago, which
be right.
that's absolutely not right. I'm pretty sure that was.
We've known about this.
It's been around forever that people have known about this thing.
I don't know the date.
I don't know the exact date on it either, but it's definitely not 3 months ago. That's not correct. And to my knowledge, Zahi Hawass is now saying, I think this may be maybe lost in translation in the communication. He's saying there's 5 hieroglyphs in each one of the relieving chambers.
I think that's right.
Is that? I thought it was just the one that was saying the gangs of Khufu. But I'm certainly not an expert on this part either. But 3 months ago, new discovery, that doesn't seem right, because they've been investigating those relieving chambers for quite some time. And I've known about that cartouche for years now, so it certainly isn't a 3-month-old discovery. I don't know where that's coming from. And if there are cartouches in each one of the relieving chambers, we'll try to find that and put that in.
Yeah, I believe it's the different gangs. I'll dig into it.
Yeah, it's entirely possible. To my knowledge, it's only just the one, but there may be multiples in there. So now Hawass is saying that they're trying to get a television crew to come to Egypt so that they can document these cartouches in the relieving chambers, which, again, these have been known about within the archaeological community for a long time. And he's saying how he is always attacked, and people hate Zahi Hawass. I think it's mostly because of his personality and his delivery. And, he hasn't done a fantastic job of bringing the receipts for everything that he's been talking about in the interview. But I can also understand that he's under a tremendous amount of pressure.
Absolutely.
And is under the scrutiny of the entire world. And it's kind of the nature of the position that he's in. Well, one thing, absolute power corrupts absolutely, which is 100% a true statement. And I'm not trying to, support some of the things that he may or may not have done. He's doing his best in this interview, which I'm sure is a position that he's never really been in before, being grilled in this type of setting. Again, if you're going to do the Joe Rogan interview, you come prepared. And he certainly wasn't prepared to answer any of these questions and didn't know where the interview was going to go. But now he's talking about how he's you know, regularly attacked by the international community. Well, it's because of some of the things that he's done in this interview where when pressed for the details, he is not able to provide concrete answers for some of the specific things that people are asking for. He's given some roundabout answers and sort of avoided some questions from Joe thus far where they don't have the answers. And in his position, he's not the type of person to say, I don't know, or we don't have the answer. He's like, no, I discovered. This is, he's always insistent that he knows all the answers, but isn't able to provide them.
It's okay to say that you don't know sometimes.
Right. Yeah. Here.
I think that's extremely well said, babe.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's certainly all right. There's again, in my position as an alternative researcher regarding the function of the Egyptian pyramids, I would certainly never say that I am the expert or even an expert. I have a hypothesis. I've proposed some certain things, but there are tons of things that I can't answer and will probably never be able to answer. And I think that's a good thing about, being objective as a scientist or a researcher or an academic is admitting what you don't know opens up the doors for learning more. And in my research, the things that I don't know are what push me to make even more discoveries because you have to continue to research and you have to continue to learn and build upon your hypothesis and make modifications where applicable. And there are absolutely some things that we just don't know about the construction technology, the stone cutting, the function, and he's just not willing to admit that he doesn't know, which again, that no wonder you're in a position of pressure because you can't just say, hey, there's some things that we don't know and we don't understand. All right, so now they're continuing to discuss these cartouches in the relieving chamber, which are written in a script called hieratic. And hieratic is a more elaborate form of hieroglyphs. He's calling it cursive hieroglyphs, which is certainly applicable. And that's part of the discussion about the authenticity of these glyphs. So it's written in hieratic, and it uses terms that are not conventional. It's not like a cartouche that has Khufu. It's a more elaborate way that doesn't use specific dynastic terms. It's again that when they discovered these things, they were using terms for Khufu and terms in these symbols that no one had really heard before. So they think that that's one of the reasons they think it is authentic, because they were using nomenclature that the people who discovered these things, and we're going to Google it real quick. When we pause for this break, we'll Google it and come back with a definitive answer, because you can find these things and find who found them in the time period. But they said that during the time period they were discovered, hieratic wasn't known in the academic community. So this was giving credence to the authenticity of the discovery that they had found a language that hadn't been used since the time of the building of Khufu. So that's one of the reasons that some people do think it's authentic, but Hawass is here saying how difficult it is to read, and they don't really even understand what those glyphs are saying specifically. So we'll check that and be right back. All right, pretty easy Google search there. So these relieving chambers were originally discovered in the 1800s by Weiss and Paring, and 1837, and they're the ones who found these red ochre. I mean, people have known about these things for a very, very long time. So to imply that this is some sort of new discovery in the past 3 months, or even that the relieving chambers are some sort of new discovery, that is absolutely not correct. I don't know where this rhetoric is coming from that he is the one that has discovered or even deciphered these things. So he's also saying that he's not an expert in reading hieroglyphics. How are you the guy, the top guy, and you're not an expert in reading hieroglyphics? Like, you would think that would be a requirement of the job position to be well qualified in reading and interpreting all forms of hieroglyphs. And
He said hieratic though, the cursive.
sure, right? Yeah, he was specific in saying he was not an expert in reading hieratic, which again, I would think that's a qualification of the job, or at least be able to, if this is such a big discovery and he's making a big to do about how they want to get, a television crew to show this live, the archaeological and historical community has known about these cartouches, so it's certainly not a new discovery. And know what it means though, and be able to accurately describe. If again, if you're the expert and you're the world expert and you're the guy, which he's made statement over and over and over, I, you know, be prepared to provide a thorough explanation for the claims that you're making. Now, they're going to start talking about the section with the scan pyramids team and the muon scanning and the discovery of the void above the Grand Gallery within the Great Pyramid. So now they're just further elaborating on the various discoveries, the corridor that runs from the north face, sort of below the chevrons on the northern side. He's talking about that discovery, the discovery of the big void above the Grand Gallery. You know, he admits he doesn't know what it's for, but he's also said that they're doing the same type of scanning in the second and third pyramids, the central pyramid, the final pyramid, Khafre and Menkaure, the conventional titles of these structures.
Now Dr. Hawass is talking about the story of Jedi, the magician of Khufu, and he's going on saying the story about how he can resurrect a man.
Yeah, so Joe is pressing him, I think, about his hypothesis. I think this, at this point, I don't know why he's telling this story, but I think this is going to lead in Hawass providing some sort of hypothesis for the existence of this chamber above the Grand Gallery. Okay, so we all know this thing, the Great Void, the Big Void in the Great Pyramid. It is located directly above the Grand Gallery, and approximately they say that's the same proportions of the Grand Gallery directly above that. If any of you follow my work, I think this is a heat exchanger for removal of some of the thermal energy that's generated during the industrial chemical manufacturing process that occurs inside of the Great Pyramid. I have a series of episodes discussing that. If you're new to this channel, go check out the Land of Chem. Just Google, I forget which episode number it is, but I have a thorough explanation for the hypothetical function of this chamber. So we're going to keep watching and see, you know, at this point, I have no idea why he's telling this story of Jedi the magician. Interesting side note, the word Jedi or Jedi obviously was later incorporated in the Star Wars franchise as being these, you know, sort of magicians. This was the term that was utilized in the ancient time, and that's where we get the modern word Jedi, is from the name of this guy, the magician, that was able to cut the head off of a cow and a man and resurrect them, Jedi or Jedi.
Yeah, in this case it's spelled Djedi.
Yes, and yeah, D like
Jed Pillar.
like Jed Pillar, Djed, where, you know, obviously Lucas just dropped the D and made it Jedi. Same pronunciation.
May the force be with you.
All right, so I still don't know where this story is going quite yet, but now Hawass has transitioned from talking about the story of Jedi and Khufu. Now he's transitioned into the magic of Moses meeting the Pharaoh, where they have this battle of pharaonic magic versus God that has taught Moses how to also do magic. And, you know, they lay their staffs down and the Pharaoh transforms into a snake, and Moses is transforms into a bigger snake, and Moses one eats the Pharaoh snake, and it's this duel of magic that they have in the chambers of the Pharaoh, which demonstrates that Moses's magic is superior to the magic of the Pharaoh. I think that's how it goes. Moses wins the battle.
That's
right.
Yeah. That's what I remember. And you have a whole episode on this, and what do you believe?
Yeah.
It
so
symbolizes.
So in my opinion, chemistry is magic from the perspective of someone that is not initiated into the science of chemistry. So if you're watching a chemistry experiment, right, you could have two clear liquids, and all of a sudden that look like water, right? Wine into water. Two clear liquids. You pour one liquid into the other one, and all of a sudden it turns red, right? A chemical reaction. But to the onlooker that doesn't understand the science of chemistry, it would appear as though it were magic. And there's several chemical reactions. They actually call one of them the Pharaoh's serpent. The other one is, so if you have sugar and you pour like a compressed rod of sugar and you pour sulfuric acid on it, there will be a chemical reaction between the sulfuric acid and the sugar molecules that creates this carbon snake, a big steaming carbon snake. If you have like a container full of sugar, this carbon snake will rise out of this container. So again, you could imagine from the perspective of an ancient onlooker that didn't understand chemical reaction, there's this big steaming demonic snake that comes up out of this container. Same thing with the, I think it's mercury. I don't want to mispronounce, but it's a mercury I'll Google it. It's a mercury compound. It's called the Pharaoh serpent. But you set this thing on fire, and this crazy octopus-looking thiocyanate. I'll Google it, but it's a mercury compound that creates a crazy chemical reaction. We'll try to put in a clip of that so
Yeah,
you can
that'd be
see
awesome.
what the Pharaoh's serpent reaction looks like. Chemistry is magic from the perspective of somebody who doesn't understand what chemistry is. I had it right. Mercury thiocyanate is the name of the compound, and it's a reaction called the Pharaoh's serpent, which quite appropriately named in this context. All right, so that whole conversation just went completely off the rails. They were talking about the void that they discovered above the Grand Gallery. Joe was pressing him for, what do you think it is? And he's like, I have a hypothesis. Let me tell you this story. He tells this big, long story about Jedi the magician and then the battle between Moses and the Pharaoh. And then Joe is asking him, do you think that magic was used in the construction of the pyramids and yada, yada. And now it's just completely off track. And that story went absolutely nowhere. So that was about, I don't know, 10 minutes of time that we were just watching that with like,
Well, I'm glad you're able to talk about the reactions.
yeah, that's pretty cool. And again, Joe was asking him, what do you think this magic is? What is your explanation for what the magic is? And again, Zahi Hawass is kind of beating around the bush that he doesn't know. But, again, think it from the perspective of science. What is the quote? Any technology sufficiently advanced is indistinguishable from magic, and that's certainly true. Again, they do these chemistry magic demonstrations, right? That's the magic of chemistry. Anyone that's done like in a chemistry 101 class, when they do these demonstrations for kids of chemistry reactions that would appear to be magic because they don't understand the science of chemistry. And that's my perspective on ancient magic. These magicians were actually practicing chemists. So a lot of the stories that you hear from the ancient mythology about magic are actually stories of people seeing chemistry, not understanding what it is, and it being perceived as being some sort of magic. The same could be applicable during the medieval time where these alchemists, right? So imagine you have a vessel and you're making an alchemical solution in a vessel. That is where the story of the witch or the sorcerer comes from with the cauldron, where you're mixing potions into a cauldron. It's actually a twist on the alchemist, the scientist, the chemist somehow being a sorcerer or a witch. It's sort of telling the same story from the perspective of of course, Catholicism demonizing science and the practice of alchemy and chemistry and this technology of chemistry and knowledge, and they demonized it to be sorcerers and witches. So it's the exact same thing: a cauldron, a beaker reaction vessel or beaker where you're creating an alchemical potion or chemical solution. Same thing for ancient mythology regarding magic.
And that's why they communicated in symbols.
Yes. So, well, again, same thing with, in my interpretation of hieroglyphs in general, it is an esoteric language that is encoded in symbols that is intended for different layers of interpretation. This is literally the definition of an esoteric symbol, is that there is an interpretation that's intended for the general public, and then deeper layers of interpretation that are only understood by those who have been initiated into the knowledge of how to interpret these symbols and reveal the deeper level of interpretation, the deeper significance, and in most cases, the actual true interpretation of the symbol. And I think hieroglyphs is definitely an esoteric, multi-layered, encoded language that, if we understand it at all, it's only the superficial level, because we are not the priestly initiates of ancient Egypt who were actually intended to understand the deeper encoded knowledge.
Said it perfectly.
All right, so they sort of concluded with this story about magic, transition into an explanation of why there's no depictions of Khufu that still exist, and that people came around and destroyed the temples. And this is common practice in Egypt, where if there was a change in the religion or a change in the rulers, later pharaohs would come around, or people would come around and deface the statues or destroy the monuments. And this is certainly true, but Hawass was giving a roundabout explanation for why there are no depictions or hieroglyphs, actual, and again, we're not talking about the red ochre ones in the relieving chambers, now actual statues or hieroglyphs in the temples surrounding the Great Pyramid, why there is none of that. He's saying it's all destroyed. So now, this is where things get interesting. So Joe is about to start pressing him about the new synthetic aperture radar Doppler scanning of the central pyramid. They also scan the Great Pyramid. So I'm interested to, well, I already know what Hawass is going to say, but I'm interested to see where the rest of this conversation goes. All right, so Joe is asking him again about the radar technology and the discovery of these pillars underneath the central pyramid. And Zahi Hawass is now refuting the potential discoveries from this team. I did a whole episode. I won't get into depth here, but if you go check out, I think it's episode 153 on my channel, if you want a full in-depth analysis of the scans thus far. Now, so he's basically, Zahi Hawass is saying that he gave this information to experts and that the synthetic aperture radar technology cannot scan in rock. There's subject for some debate here in regard to the viability of this technology.
Insert clip here.
Yeah, insert clip here. So, long story short, the radar itself does not penetrate the rock. The way their technology works is that it interprets micro vibrations on the surface of the structure, and the difference in these vibrations is interpreted by the technology that was developed by Filippo Biondi. He is the developer of a software that can interpret these radar scans as being potentially indicative of hidden chambers. So that's the basis of their technology, is this proprietary software developed by Filippo Biondi. So it's a 3-member team: Corrado Malanga, Filippo Biondi, and Armando Mei. Corrado Malanga is sort of the alternative historian, that's being generous. Filippo Biondi is the developer of the technology, and Armando Mei is the Egyptologist. And Zahi Hawass is saying these guys have never been to Egypt. The technology doesn't work. You give it to experts. The experts say this synthetic aperture radar technology can't work. long story again, long story short, there's vetted technologies that we have for internally scanning these things. Synthetic aperture radar hasn't quite been vetted in the academic community yet as being an extremely reliable technology for detecting undiscovered structures. In many cases, it has difficulty detecting the known structures, which is a big problem. Um, I, I, well, I'll go ahead and say it here because it's worth mentioning. So they made a post on social media claiming that the reason that their technology cannot detect the known chambers in the central pyramid is because the radar signal is absorbed by the limestone that these chambers are excavated from. And it absorbs the signal. So they can't detect the known chambers inside of the central pyramid, which are less than 20 meters in bedrock limestone of the Giza plateau. We can't detect these chambers. It doesn't show up on our scans because the radar signal gets absorbed by this limestone. Less than 20 meters.
Huge problem.
But yet they also make the claim that they can detect hidden structures 600 meters in the same limestone bedrock. It's all limestone bedrock. The chambers of the central pyramid are excavated directly from the limestone bedrock. The primary chamber is maybe 15 feet below the ground level of the Giza plateau bedrock. The other chamber is a little bit lower. Again, cumulative depth of these chambers is less than 20 meters. And they literally said, quote, the signal is absorbed by this limestone bedrock and we can't detect chambers in 20 meters. But again, they're making a claim that there's a big issue with this. So now Joe is asking Zahi Hawass, have you ever heard of the Osiris shaft? And he's like, oh, I discovered it. I discovered the Osiris shaft, which is absolutely not true. He did not discover, it was first mentioned by Herodotus, and it was actually discovered in the 1930s by Salim Hassan. So Zahi Hawass absolutely did not discover the Osiris shaft. He excavated it, that is true, but he did not discover the Osiris shaft. And now Joe is going to ask him, so, oh, again, I don't want this whole thing to be about burning these guys. So I won't get into more elaboration on the Osiris shaft, as I have a special episode coming up on the channel where I'm going to break this thing down. And so now Joe is going to press him about, so they also scanned the Osiris shaft, and I use that in quotes for a reason. And yeah, you'll see coming up. But he's going to ask him, so they scanned the Osiris shaft. It vaguely shows tiered structure, but there's like 7 tiers. And they say that the 3 top tiers are supposed to be the Osiris shaft. That's what they're talking about now.
About the huge blob to the left?
Yeah, there's another on the scan, the original. If you look at the original scan data, there's a huge blob of other vertical structures to the left where we know absolutely nothing is there. And this vertical signature with horizontal tiers seems to be the generic signature detected by this technology. No matter where they scan it, they get this exact same signature. So I'm extremely skeptical. We don't even know that that's actually the location that they scanned. They could have scanned anywhere, got this signature of these seemingly 3, but there's not 3. That shows like 7 different tiers. We know there's nothing below the Osiris shaft because that's below the groundwater, but yet it's showing these other tiers that they've just completely ignored. So don't get me started. I'm going to burn this thing to the ground in upcoming episode. That's what they're talking about now. No. He's like asking about the Osiris shaft. He's like, no, I'm the one who found it. They did not find anything. Joe isn't saying that the synthetic aperture radar team discovered the Osiris shaft, and Zahi Hawass is getting all butthurt saying that he's the one that discovered the Osiris shaft. Joe is simply trying to ask him, have you seen the scans of the Osiris shaft that were performed by the synthetic aperture radar team that appear to show the Osiris shaft? So again, what they're trying to do now is scan known structures and show that their technology has the ability to reliably detect the known configuration, which is
Step one.
step number one, right? So if you have a new technology that you're developing for internal scanning of ancient structures, step number one is, without any interpretation or we discovered the lost halls of Amenti and huge city below Giza,
It's bold.
don't burn the bridge before you already cross it, which is exactly what they did by making this completely just outrageous claim
Sensational.
before establishing the viability of the technology. Show the academic and scientific community that your new technology can reliably detect the known configuration of structures. Here's the Great Pyramid. We scanned it using our technology. Look how it accurately picks up all of the known chambers. Here's the Central Pyramid. Look at how it shows us, clear as day. Again, they use the word in their first parrot, transparent like a crystal. They use this nomenclature to describe the ability of this technology to detect. Nothing in their scans whatsoever are clear. It's blurry and vague at best, and that's being generous. So that should be step number one, is establishing the viability of the technology to reliably scan and show the known configuration. So that's what they've attempted to do with the Osiris shaft. They scan the area. There's no way for the academic community to actually know how do we know that's the area? There's absolutely nothing about that scan that shows the causeway. It shows this huge blob of other identical features to what they're saying is the Osiris shaft that's right next to it, but we know there's nothing there on the causeway. So there's no way for us to know for sure that they're actually scanning the area that is the Osiris shaft that made this new scan data.
Yeah, that's a great point.
But
There
that's,
should be markers.
again, it show the causeway. Where is the causeway in this? And I'll break it all down on the channel coming up soon because I have a lot to say about this. Now, all that being said, there is some potential, but they need to dial it in and stop talking about outrageous claims if you're really trying to get traction within the academic, archaeological, historical community. Take it to the Red Pyramid, for example. Scan the Red Pyramid, show a northern inlet shaft, show 3 distinct chambers. Say, hey, this is what we got. This is the data. No fancy models, just show the friggin' data with a reliable, accurate, repeatable scan ability of detecting the known configuration so that people will actually start to think that this is a usable technology. Once you've established the legitimacy of the technology and the software to reliably detect known chambers, then you can go and talk about hidden chambers because you've already established the credibility of the technology. They did it the complete opposite way. So we'll see where the rest of this. Zahi Hawass is going to deny the claim. Joe Rogan's going to push him on it. I've seen this clip already. They argue a little bit because Zahi Hawass does not want to hear it, but he should be able to calmly articulate objections against this new finding. So we'll see what he does. All right, so they're kind of back and forth. As Zahi Hawass says, no, it's not true. This is something lost in translation. Zahi Hawass doesn't understand. In this point of the conversation, Joe is just trying to communicate to him that, hey, they scanned this area. They've detected something that looks like the configuration of the Osiris shaft in an attempt to do exactly what I just explained, which is demonstrate the viability of the technology to scan known structures and show the configuration that we know. And Zahi Hawass says, no, they're liars. They didn't discover anything. And it's just being lost in translation where he doesn't understand that, what Joe is actually asking at this point in the conversation. But he's, no, I discovered everything. So I can tell Hawass is getting agitated and he's upset. He just said the Osiris shaft is 50 feet. It's not 50 feet. It's 30 meters. 100, almost 100 feet. It's 33 meters, 100 feet underground. He just said it's 50 feet. Zahi Hawass is kind of an old man, and he's not used to being pressed in this sort of rigorous interview type situation. And he's getting flustered because Joe is asking about the scans. he clearly doesn't like the Italian team because the SAR team did not involve Egypt whatsoever. They didn't get any permission. They didn't do any collaboration. There was no approval. There was no consultation with the Ministry of Antiquities. They used radar from space, did this scan, made a huge public announcement, and now the whole community's been talking about this thing for months now. And Hawass and the Ministry of Antiquities were not involved whatsoever. So already, no matter what this SAR team, again, didn't go about it in a very scientific way. If you're studying Egypt and you want to be, and I don't know if they actually do want to be accepted by the academic community because they've gone about it in the completely wrong way. If your objective is to be accepted by the archaeological scientific community and presenting a new technology for scanning ancient structures, specifically underground structures, you consult with the Ministry of Antiquities and you do it like actual scientists instead of claiming that you discovered a huge city in the halls of Amenti, which are completely fictitious. You consult with the authorities and do it like actual scientists, where you're, again, establishing the legitimacy of your technology first and foremost in conjunction with the Egyptians. And they didn't do that. So no matter what these guys discovered, even if it is 100% true, and they found the halls of Amenti in these big tubes underneath the central pyramid, it will absolutely never be accepted by conventional academia or the scientific community because they went about it the completely wrong way. So, of course, Zahi Hawass doesn't like these guys. Good luck ever getting back to Egypt, by the way, SAR team. Kind of burned that one to the ground as well. So that being said, Armando Mei did do a smart thing and came to Egypt for a big investigation before the big discovery was announced. So he was able to come and do some documentation. But now that they know who these guys are, I mean, good luck getting back into Egypt. And again, they have created a huge uphill battle for themselves by not presenting it in a very scientific manner. This technology has all the potential in the world. And I'm still, even after making a video, being very, very skeptical, which I certainly am. It has all of the potential in the world. And this is the type of technology that this our community needs, is independent technology that can do these sort of things. But we need to know that it's real. And I really disagree with the approach that they've taken in trying to establish the actual applications of this technology. So now Hawass is saying how he showed this scan data to people that actually work with known vetted scanning technology, like the Muon team and et cetera, et cetera. And everybody's saying it's bullshit. The scientific community is saying it's bullshit, which is absolutely true, that the conventional academic and scientific communities have basically shat all over their project because they haven't approached it in a very scientific way for, again, demonstrating the viability of the technology. I know I've said that multiple times now, but it's so critical in the whole discussion of this SAR discovery is this a viable technology? And there have been video after video and within the academic community of people showing why this technology cannot work. And I have yet to hear a good explanation, and we have something in the works coming up soon where we may, wink, wink, actually get a good in-person explanation of some very burning questions that I have. So we're very excited to, well, you'll know it because you'll see it on both of our channels when this comes out. But we'll finally get a chance to get some real questions answered and some exclusive content that I guarantee you won't see anywhere else. So yeah, we're very excited. It's so pissed. Again, they're back and forth about Joe is trying to just explain that the scanning team has scanned the Osiris shaft and that their claim is that they're able to detect the known configuration. And Zahi Hawass is just getting very, very frustrated. And they discovered nothing. He's clearly very upset, and he doesn't understand what Joe's actually trying to explain at this point. But again, I can only see that it goes downhill from here because what is he, probably 70?
I think so.
Yeah, he's got to be in his 70s. Crotchety old man, to be generous. sitting there. He's probably high out of his mind off the nicotine from that cigar, the way he sucked the whole thing down and smoking the band.
Too.
So he, um, he's probably not doing the best that he possibly could from an intellectual perspective at this point, because again, Joe is grilling him and he's asking some very legitimate questions. And in Hawass's position, he's not used to this sort of intense, very specific line of inquiry, because nobody, he's not used to being, he was the authority and he's not used to being questioned like this. So again, he's getting very upset because he thinks Joe is saying that the SAR team discovered the Osiris shaft, and they discovered nothing. I discovered. Well, Hawass, you didn't discover it either, buddy. It was discovered in the 1930s, and it's been known about since long before then. So now Hawass is saying that, again, kind of the point that I made, that the chambers in the central pyramid, Hawass said it's 28 feet. So, again, 10 meters into the limestone bedrock of the Giza plateau. There are two primary chambers in the central pyramid, an upper chamber and a lower chamber. These are connected by two inlets from the outside, and then there's a connecting passage that links the primary chamber to the lower chamber. These chambers were excavated directly from the limestone bedrock of the Giza plateau. Hawass is saying 28 feet deep. So like I was saying, less than 20 meters. 10 meters, 10 meters deep into the Giza plateau, and the synthetic aperture radar signal. And this is a quote from their social media. Go look at it on Facebook. You can Google. It's still there. I have screenshots of it. It said, our signal is absorbed by the limestone, and we cannot detect the known chambers because our signal is being absorbed by the limestone 28 feet deep. But yet they claim that it's all the same bedrock. There is absolutely no differentiation between the limestone bedrock below the central pyramid and all the rest of the bedrock below it. It can't penetrate, and it gets absorbed in 28 feet of limestone bedrock, and we can't show what's in there because there is no signal, can't detect anything.
That totally discredits
it completely discredits absolutely everything else. So again, to reiterate the point, step one is to show the viability of the technology to detect the known chambers, which everybody's argument is that they haven't been able to do this yet. And we haven't gotten a good yet. This is
stay tuned. Maybe
stay tuned. Again, I don't want to spoil it quite yet, but there's some major stuff coming up, and we might be able to finally get some direct answers from the team itself. All right, so now they're kind of back and forth about Hawass is saying, well, we work with teams on the Giza Plateau that uses known technology. For example, muon scanning. The Central Pyramid was scanned using muon technology in the 1970s in the exact same area above the Belzoni chamber that was recently scanned by the synthetic aperture radar team. And you know what the muon scanning project found? The vetted technology that discovered the new chamber, the Great Void above the Grand Gallery. You know what they found? Absolutely nothing. And the synthetic aperture radar team is saying they discovered these the Z chambers, 5 Z chambers in the same area where the vetted technology that everyone knows works and is actually very accurate and reliable for detecting unknown chambers. They made a huge discovery, the hidden void in the Great Pyramid, a huge legitimate discovery that has been corroborated by multiple different types of scanning technology. They used the muon scanning in the Central Pyramid, same area above the Belzoni chamber, found absolutely nothing. So again, there's a huge issue where what is being reported by the synthetic aperture radar team is not being corroborated with known technology. So that's a second huge issue. And now Hawass and Joe are kind of back and forth arguing a little bit. Again, I knew this was going to get spicy because, again, Hawass is pissed that they didn't contact him and they weren't involved whatsoever. And of course, again, like I said, no matter what they discover, they're going to shoot it down. They're going to shoot it right down. The Egyptians will not allow anything to be discovered in Egypt without their involvement. That's period. That's the way it works. So again, if they had any chance at legitimizing this technology, they went about it the complete wrong way. Unfortunately, that's just not how it works here. Or within the academic community. If you're working in any foreign country, let's say we wanted to go scan Göbekli Tepe and you didn't involve the Turkish government, no matter what you find is never going to be legitimized by the archaeological community. That's just not a very scientific approach, is to essentially illegally scan ancient monuments. So they, again, not the best approach.
Regardless, it's great for Egypt because we're experiencing another Egyptomania and everyone's so excited. And it's only going to increase tourism.
Yeah, so I will say, from our perspective and for the perspective of the alternative media YouTube community, this has been a huge boost for everyone that's made videos about this, has gotten huge amount of views. It's generated so much interest, renewed interest in the Egyptian pyramids. So these guys are very, very smart and they know exactly what they are doing. And again, no matter what, it's good for Egypt, which all of their economy here is based on tourism. So, they always say all press is good press,
That's
and
right.
whether it's good or bad or whether it's true or not, as long as people are talking about it, and then again, they're having a huge public discussion. Joe knows about the scans. They're doing international press conferences. They're getting, whether it's good or bad traction, it's irrelevant because it's creating revenue for it all comes back to Egypt anyway in terms of the tourism dollars. So it's a positive thing across the board because again, so sick of hearing about it at this point.
Right before the opening of the gym as well.
Yeah, and we
The
have the
timing's
the
interesting.
opening of the new Grand Egyptian Museum is coming up in a couple months from now. It's been open for a while. They just don't have the new Tutankhamun exhibit open yet, but the official grand opening is coming up in a couple months. So it's going to be a really, really busy summer. And again, this SR, they're smart guys, and they're gonna monetize this thing in a whole bunch of different ways. Tours, press conferences, international whatevers, and they're doing it. So hats off to them. I think they still have some work to do before any of this gets any legitimate traction. Now it's all speculation and people in the alternative community. So we'll see where it goes. So, oh, I almost feel bad for him. So there have been several times in this podcast where Hawass says, I am a scientist. I am a scientist. And now he's backpedaling and saying, oh, I'm not a scientist. I'm not a scientist. Whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm not now I'm not a scientist. When I'm being asked about actual scientific questions, I'm not a scientist. But I am a scientist, but I'm not a scientist. So
It's not his first language, too. Maybe
oh
it
yeah,
was
yeah.
a mistake,
Well,
wasn't
so
it?
this whole again, it's a very awkward conversation. If any of you guys have watched this, it's like, oh man, it's painful to listen to because Joe is just trying to communicate again using very technical terms that I think it's the language barrier. Hawass isn't understanding that Joe is trying to ask him about the potential of the imaging technology. Hawass is interpreting this as they have somehow discovered something. So he's getting really defensive about, no, they didn't discover it. Well, that's not what Joe is trying to say. And it's just good. It's very, very painful to watch. Oh, good job, Jamie,
Yeah,
pulling
I
up
found
pulling
it.
up their original research paper, which I mentioned this quote specifically in the abstract of the original paper by the SIR technology team. And they state that there is limited ability of synthetic aperture radar to penetrate targets. So they have to develop a software and an experimental technique that allows them to detect the synthetic aperture radar does not penetrate, period. Period. It does not penetrate anything. It's not moving through the limestone to detect. They have a proprietary software developed by Filippo Biondi that allows them to detect, they call them phonons, micro vibrations on the surface of the structures that they're scanning. And then again, shout out Jamie, because they made it very, very clear in the abstract of their first paper that synthetic aperture radar cannot reliably penetrate target objects. And now that's what they're talking about now. And Joe is like, because again, you gotta actually read the technical data. All of the hype around this scanning technology has been from the 3D models. and absolutely no one has been paying attention to the actual paper that was written back in 2022 explaining their experimental methodology on the technology. I did an extensive episode on that. Check out, we'll put links to everything in the video description below if you want to watch the relevant content. But this has all been, no, everybody's looking at the models, nobody's looking at the actual data or the research, which there's a huge cavernous void between what they show in the models and what is in the actual data. And now Joe said, well, I guess I just don't neither one of them understand the technology. Nobody understands this technology.
It's proprietary.
The synthetic aperture radar, there are people that use synthetic aperture radar, but the software that has been developed to interpret the signals by Filippo Biondi is proprietary software. He is the only person who is the singular expert. Again, that's a big issue. So Hawass doesn't understand the technology. Joe doesn't understand the technology. Nobody understands the technology. That's why this whole thing is so controversial, is because they have yet to provide a good explanation of how the software works. What exactly, again, I challenge you, all of you, keyboard warriors out there, go read the first paper. Good luck with that. All right, so you can clearly tell they're both like exhausted at this point. Rogan is probably over the interview. Hawass is definitely over being grilled by Rogan. And after arguing back and forth for a little bit, like, okay, we agree to disagree on the SAR scans because they're never going to come to terms on that. There's definitely a language barrier there where there's some loss in translation. Zahi Hawass doesn't understand exactly what he's saying. Rogan's getting frustrated. Hawass is getting frustrated. So thankfully they've moved on. That was super awkward discussion.
Stressful.
Yeah, very, very. So now Joe is asking him again, what was so compelling to the Egyptians that justified the type of construction that we see in the Egyptian pyramids, which is a good question. All right, so now they've sort of moved on in the discussion, and Hawass was saying that the impetus for the construction of all of these monuments is because of their profound belief in the afterlife and the deification of the pharaoh, becoming a god and moving into the afterlife justifies the construction of all these things. So from my standpoint, their infrastructure projects, they were functional machines, essentially, that were going to produce a variety of different chemicals that would be the most beneficial thing for the entire civilization. A very, very valuable industrial project that would increase the quality of life for the entire population. Same thing we have today with any industrial infrastructure project. It has to be, the ends have to justify the means. And to me, that's a more applicable explanation for why these things were built, is because of the valuable nature of the products that were being created inside of these pyramids. So now they're going on to, that discussion kind of went nowhere and fizzled out. Yeah, you can tell they're both really annoyed and probably over the interview at this point. Now they're talking about how Zahi Hawass, which I didn't know, met, what was the son of Edgar Cayce, and they're going to start talking about the Sphinx now.
This will be interesting.
Yeah.
So Zahi Hawass is saying that he did discover that there were 4 tunnels within the Sphinx.
Yeah, so he's basically just, again, like Lex just said, he said there was 4. I think we've only heard him describe the location of the 3 thus far, but we did know for sure the one between the paws behind the stela, that's new. I've never heard of that being reported before. We did know about the one on the top. There appears to be a hole in the back of the Sphinx, like between the shoulder blades area, and then also on the head. The head, I don't think actually goes anywhere. I think it's just a hole. But Hawass is saying that there's a tunnel, a 25-foot tunnel on the upper back of the Sphinx, which is an access point. And then the one on the ass end does go down to a rock cut chamber, but it doesn't go anywhere. If you they showed that on the Mr. Beast thing where they go down inside of this chamber, and it doesn't go anywhere. All right, now he's saying that they discovered in these tunnels pottery from the 25th dynasty, and according to Hawass's interpretation, that these tunnels were not original to the Sphinx construction, that they were excavated later in the dynastic period by later Egyptians that were looking for stuff underneath the Sphinx, and they left this pottery that has been dated to the 25th dynasty. Again, the conventional timeline for all of this stuff is the pyramids on the Giza plateau were built during the 4th dynasty, Khufu, Khafra, and Menkaura. The Sphinx is conventionally attributed to Khafra, the builder of the middle central pyramid. So 4th dynasty. He's saying that these tunnels come from the 25th dynasty, way later in the dynastic Egyptian timeline, and they carved these tunnels looking for something under the Sphinx, left this pottery there. And now he's going to talk about Edgar Cayce. So the remaining part of the Edgar Cayce discussion was basically, so they did some drilling when they were concerned about the fluctuation of the water table below the Sphinx. They drilled a bunch of stuff to monitor the fluctuations of the water table, didn't find anything. So Hawass is basically saying Edgar Cayce was wrong. There are no hidden chambers underneath the Sphinx other than the tunnels that don't go anywhere that they've already discovered and documented. Now they're talking about the erosion on the back side of the Sphinx enclosure and the work of Dr. Robert Schoch. And, Joe's asking him, what's your opinion on the erosion? So we'll see what his response is to that. All right, so it was a pretty quick discussion on the erosion at the back of the Sphinx. Hawass basically did kind of a straw man argument that's saying that Robert Bauval and Robert Schoch are New Age people, and basically their opinion is irrelevant because they are not scientists that he worked with directly. Robert Schoch basically proposes that the vertical erosion patterns at the back of the Sphinx enclosure are from water, which create, again, vertical ruts on the back of the Sphinx. They're clearly visible, not on the back of the Sphinx enclosure. Hawass counters with that, said that they got a geologist from Louisville University to come to Egypt and work with them, and they determined it's just sand erosion, which, if any of you have spent time on the Giza Plateau, there's a very distinct difference between sand erosion, which blows horizontally, and you can see plenty of areas on the Giza Plateau where there are huge blocks of limestone. For example,
the eastern temples, it's quite clear.
Exactly, yeah. So, for example, the eastern temple of the final pyramid, this thing was buried in sand, and there were pieces of the temple that were sticking out above the sand. The areas of the temple that were exposed to the sand have huge horizontal erosion features where you can literally envision sand and wind blowing through these horizontal erosion features. Okay, horizontal erosion.
All right, let's take a look inside. This looks like an incline. It's a tubular drill here. Perhaps this was a stairwell through the roof of the temple. This looks like a step here. Here appears we're on the second level of the eastern temple to the central pyramid. It's a unique vantage point. You can better see the layout of the temple. This is a pillared corridor here. It's open.
Are you ready to make moves?
1 second.
it looks absolutely nothing like what you see on the back of the Sphinx enclosure, which is very clearly liquid of some sort. I'm not going to say water, but it was a fluid of some sort, creating vertical erosion. So Joe was presenting the information by Dr. Robert Schoch, who, again, is not just a New Age person. He's a doctor of geology, an actual academic. Hawass counters with that and say, no, it's just normal sand erosion. Then they go back and forth about the construction of the Sphinx, which, again, who cares? I mean, the Sphinx monument is mostly what you see today of the Sphinx monument is mostly Greek and Roman. All of the stones that are there today are mostly Greek and Roman. It's a statue that was built during dynastic period. Okay, great. And that's I'm a bit contemptuous of the Sphinx discussion. I have my own thoughts on what the Sphinx was originally. The statue itself, the Sphinx monument itself, in my opinion, has absolutely nothing to do with the pyramids. Completely different time period. So with that being said, Hawass just had to take a restroom break. We're now 1 hour into this recording, which I'm sure Lex is going to do her magic in the editing studio again. She did a fantastic job on the first episode, and we'll put in some receipts for all of the things that we've been saying as we try to document all of this stuff with either our on-site footage, actual research photos, et cetera, for whatever we talked about in this part. There's still another half an hour of the interview, so we'll come back for part 3.
Awesome.
You want to say anything to the people?
That was a lot of fun, and we learned a few new things as well.
Yeah, it's been a very interesting discussion. Certainly a little awkward.
Do you sympathize with Hawass at all?
Well, I can certainly no. I was going to say yes, but in his position, in any sort of interview, you come prepared, and
This is important.
no matter you should be so thoroughly prepared that regardless of what comes up in the conversation, you can pull it up immediately. Sit me in that chair, and I will have so many slides that Joe's head would explode from all of the documentation and evidence that I would provide for supporting my theories. You come prepared with all that stuff, and he had to know in advance that Joe was going to ask about certain lines of questioning just based on, or either he didn't do any research ahead of time to see what Joe was interested in. So I was going to say I sympathize with him, but I don't really, because again, if he is the predominant expert and he's the representative of the Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities and he's the scientist and he's the archaeologist and he made all the discoveries, come with the slide deck. At least a couple of photos. Oh, hey, this is me inside of XYZ and this is the discovery we made. And, again, he just didn't bother to do any of that, which I don't, again, it's not a good look overall. And he made some very clear factual errors in this one, again, saying that the Osiris shaft is only 50 feet deep. That's blatantly wrong. There have been a number of times where there's certainly something lost in translation, and they're both kind of getting flustered. Again, kudos to Joe for just being very patient and his temperament during this whole thing. He's just, he's not being aggressive in his questioning. He's being very calm and level-headed during the whole thing. So as always, he does a great job mediating the conversation.
And Jamie for finding that bit of information.
Yeah,
Technical paper.
yeah. Jamie always does a spectacular job on the spot, Googling and finding all the stuff, and for presenting in the middle of the discussion that there is some speculation about. Again, this, if you read the original paper published by the Synthetic Aperture Radar team from 2022 regarding their scans of the Great Pyramid, the first sentence in the abstract of their paper discusses the limitations and the problems with synthetic aperture radar not being able to penetrate target objects. Read the first line of the abstract. It's literally the first sentence. So they're well aware of the limitations of this technology. I'm excited to see the remaining 30 minutes of the conversation. I know I saw the ending clip where it's Hawass and Joe, they're both like
Oh,
checking
no.
their watches. They're like, they're both ready to get the hell out of there. But I hope you all have enjoyed this joint collaboration between my beautiful wife, Alexa, from Ancient Odysseys. Obviously, this is on her channel. You know where you're watching this. My name is Geoffrey Drumm, author and host of The Land of Chem. So if you haven't already, please subscribe, like, leave some comments, and we'll try to do a part 3 as soon as possible.